Please welcome AIPAC Director of Legislative Strategy, Policy, and Government Affairs, Ester Kurz.
What a fantastic performance to kick us off. Welcome, everybody. I want to thank you all for coming and taking the time to come to our nation's capital to show your support for the U.S.-Israel relationship this week. As someone who has worked with Congress for over 3 decades to advance key pro-Israel legislation, I can promise you there is no better way to make an impact than by being here and meeting with your members of Congress and their staff to discuss these critical initiatives. We have a wonderful program lined up this afternoon, headlined by some of our most outspoken pro-Israel champions in Congress, as well as an inspiring pair of AIPAC campus activists who will share their unique connection to Israel. Before we start, I want to acknowledge Congressman Jim Jordan, who is joining us in the audience today. Thank you, Congressman. Here he is. Thank you for being with us. A great friend of the U.S.-Israel relationship. With that, let's just dive in. Our first panelist this afternoon, Representatives Ted Deutch of Florida, and Mark Meadows of North Carolina. All right, we got the North Carolina contingency. They both play an absolutely critical role in crafting and passing legislation that directly impacts America's relationship with Israel. Representative Deutch is chair of the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on the Middle East, North Africa, and International Terrorism. Representative Meadows is chair of the House Freedom Caucus and a former member of the Middle East Subcommittee. They join us this afternoon to share their thoughts on the state of the Middle East and how America and Israel can work together to confront shared threats. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Representatives Ted Deutch and Mark Meadows. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thanks. It's great to be here. I'm on your left. It's the first time I've been to the left of anybody.
Well, this session is called Bipartisanship in Action, so we've now switched roles. There we go.
Yeah,
You'll be the Democrat and you can be the Republican. Let's talk a little bit about Israel and the case for Israel, because I'm sure you are both very strong supporters and very vocal supporters of Israel. But you've probably gotten your share of criticism over the years for your support for Israel. And unfortunately, we saw recently one of your colleagues actually question the loyalty of those who support Israel. And that was a very tough moment for all of us. And I know you, Congressman Deutch, played an active role in that discussion, and you gave a speech on the House floor, which I highly recommend. Yes. If you haven't seen the speech, watch it on YouTube. It is amazing. It really is. And we give you a lot of credit for and you spoke obviously from the heart about your support for Israel and how hurtful the charges of dual loyalty are. So maybe you could share with us a little bit some of the thoughts you had on the floor and just your general thoughts on the issue.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for doing this. It's great to be with Mark. It's great to have Mark on my left for the first time ever. I went to the floor because the charge of dual loyalty is one that, for me and for so many people here, means it's an attack against who we are. I'm the son of a World War II veteran who earned a Purple Heart in the Battle of the Bulge, fighting the Nazis. I lost a whole line of my family that I will never know at the hands of the Nazis, and I know that throughout history, when there are charges of dual loyalty, those charges often lead to attacks and violence and being kicked out of countries and death. And this was not a debate about policy. This was not a debate about Israel. It was questioning those of us who support Israel. And there is no place for those kinds of suggestions. We have to be clear that anti-Semitic language can never be tolerated in our public discourse. The history proves why that's so. And so I felt compelled to speak out, and I hope that speaking passionately and speaking from my heart helped to give people a better understanding of why anti-Semitism is a canary in the coal mine. If there is anti-Semitism anywhere, it means that there is hatred. That hatred can lead to violence, and as we saw just months ago in Pittsburgh, that violence can lead to death. I would say one last point about the importance of bipartisanship, which is what this panel is about trying to retain civil discourse and not pitting one group against another. And just as there are thousands of people in this hall today, there are Democrats and there are Republicans, there is not a Republican here, none, who would turn to their Democratic neighbor and suggest that they're anti-Jewish or anti-Israel. Mark would never do that to me, and it's really important that we be careful not to try to use the U.S.-Israel relationship for political gain, because ultimately it's by standing together that we strengthen Israel the best.
Thank you, and thank you for your leadership on that. That was really very important. Mark, you've also been a strong supporter of Israel. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that support. And as Ted mentioned, the whole issue of bipartisanship. It's no secret that you have disagreements with Democrats on a whole slew of issues.
You mean there is no secret to that?
Shh, nobody here knows. I won't tell. But on this issue, you've been able to put aside those agreements and work with Ted. I know you guys have worked well together on pro-Israel legislation. How does that happen?
Well, I think you have to have a passion for what you believe in, and both Ted and I have the same passion, which is to stand for the nation of Israel and the Jewish people, to speak out when it's convenient, but also, like Ted just did, when it's inconvenient. And we need to make sure that we do that. I can tell you, one of the things that I remember the most about Ted is we were looking for a Democrat co-sponsor when the Republicans had the majority. And when you sign on to a bill with the chairman of the Freedom Caucus and you represent Ted's district, it is not normally a good day back home in Florida. And yet, here Ted was willing to do that, to come across and with the Hezbollah sanctioning bill, where we actually work together in a real way. It is law. It is actually changing the way that terrorists move money around, and we need to be serious about it. So, but you also have to do it for the right reason. I mean, and Ted was just talking about this. My wife and I really each and every day look at what can we do for the nation of Israel and the Jewish people. Not because it gets us more votes, not because it gets us more clout anywhere else, but because it's the right thing to do, and we need to make sure that we do that each and every day. So it's great. I actually got Ted's old office. Ted was, he's been here, I guess, 1.5 terms more than I have. So he had an office, and you get it based on seniority. And so when Ted left his office in Longworth, I came in, and I pledged that it would be just as pro-Israel as when he was in it. So,
and
we'll have to make sure that everybody gets that office from now on.
And I'm pretty sure I left the mezuzah on the door.
A great example of the bipartisanship and why it all works, so thank you both. Let's talk about the region for a minute, because obviously there's tremendous turmoil in the Middle East right now, and the shocking news this morning of 7 Israelis wounded by the rocket that hit from Gaza, a reminder of the importance of missile defense. And unfortunately, in this case, the Iron Dome was not able to stop the rocket, but just think about all the many hundreds of rockets that were stopped and the tragedy that might have happened if they hadn't been. But you have Iran in the region, obviously on the move. They want a permanent presence in Syria. They're working in Iraq. They're in Yemen. They're in Lebanon. They're in Gaza. They're trying to get into Jordan. They are really trying to take over the Middle East and surround Israel with missiles and rockets and Shiite militias that will be ready to attack Israel at any moment. And it's obviously a very disturbing thing. They're also developing missiles, and there's some hints that they're cheating on their nuclear program as well. So, Mark, maybe you could talk a little bit. And Congress has been very active in this regard. Are there things Congress can be doing to combat Iran's regional aggression in the region?
Well, I think what we need to do, Ted and I need to do a Hezbollah sanctioning bill 2.0.
Okay.
Because once we put...
You heard it first here.
Yeah, once we put the Hezbollah sanctioning bill into place, it changed the way that the terrorists were moving around the money. We could see that. And so now what they're doing is trying to shift it around, so we actually need to work on that. But we also need to be vigilant about the fact that the enemy is the enemy and who is not the enemy. And Iran is certainly the enemy, not just in Syria and Lebanon, but we need to articulate that each and every day. And I think no better way than to articulate it the way that it's going to happen today is to recognize the Golan Heights as part of Israel, and we need to stand firm there. And so I'm tickled to death that that's going to happen.
Ted, do you have thoughts on the Iran situation?
Sure. It's Mark's right about identifying the enemy. The one thing that's clear about Iran is what they want. They want people to pay attention to them. They're not a superpower. They try to generate attention for themselves by sowing discord in the region. They want nuclear weapons. They want ballistic missiles. They continue to fund terror. They continue to seek out this land bridge from Tehran through Baghdad, now through Damascus onto Beirut. And it's up to Congress to look at every way possible to prevent them from succeeding. So there's legislation that the House has passed that I hope the Senate has an opportunity to move on that will impose tougher sanctions on Iran in all of these areas. And it's important to remember that the nuclear issue is a serious one. It is fundamental. It would Iran with a nuclear weapon would pose an existential threat to Israel, and we have to focus on it. We also have to prevent them from having this land bridge. We have to stand up to their destabilizing activities in the region. And let's remember, Iran is the greatest violator of human rights in the region. We're at an AIPAC policy conference. When you contrast the nation of Israel and where Israel stands on human rights and standing up for democratic values, and you contrast that with the Republic of Iran, which routinely violates the human rights of its own citizens, it is eminently clear who we ought to be supporting. That's why we're here supporting Israel and the U.S.-Israel relationship, and that's why we need to work together, Democrats and Republicans, to prevent Iran from expanding their influence in the region.
And I would also say it's a critical message to send up to Capitol Hill tomorrow, because you are engaged members of Congress, you care about the issue, but so many members of Congress have other issues to worry about, are thinking about 10 other issues in a day, and don't have as much of a focus as both of you have. So I think the message tomorrow is going to be important. Which gets me to a point, Congressman Deutch, you introduced a bill with Joe Wilson recently that we're going to be up lobbying on tomorrow on Capitol Hill, a very important piece of legislation called, this goes right off the tongue, the U.S.-Israel Cooperation, Enhancement, and Regional Security Act, CIRSA.
Right.
HR 1837. Could you talk a little bit about that bill,
Sure.
what it does, and also what do you see as the prospects for getting it through this year?
Well, the legislation, I think, is awfully important, particularly at this moment, for what it does and for the message that it sends. What it does is it recognizes the existing cooperation between the United States and Israel in areas like cyber and energy, and it expands them. It looks for new areas of cooperation, healthcare, humanitarian assistance, where the United States and Israel can do even more together, and it encourages that cooperation. That sends a strong message about how the United States views Israel as a partner and the good work that the United States and Israel can and already are doing together, and looking for more ways to expand that to benefit both countries and ultimately to benefit the world. That's a piece of it. It also will take the memorandum of understanding between the United States and Israel on security assistance, and for the first time put that security commitment into statute, so that Congress will be on record making clear we are committed to ensuring Israel's ability to defend herself by herself. That's an important part of it. And then finally, and really quickly, it will also help to ensure that security assistance and the U.S. security coordinator, who plays a vital role in the region in cooperating with Israel and with the Palestinian security forces to prevent terror attacks, can continue to do the important work that he does. He's a 3-star general, plays, as I said, a crucial role in enhancing Israel's security, and this bill will allow him to continue to do his work as well.
You think we can get it through this Congress? What's your sense of
The first.
You know the speaker by the.
I do, and the first step, and again, timing is everything. There
just
are.
so happened to have introduced it right before our conference.
I didn't even know 19,000 of our friends would be coming to town. But the fact is, all of you who will be going up to Capitol Hill will have an opportunity to talk to our colleagues. And Esther, as you point out, not all of them think about these issues on a regular basis the way that we do, care deeply about these issues and look for ways to strengthen the relationship. Here's a way to do it. Your voices in advocating for this important bipartisan piece of legislation will help propel us forward, and I'm optimistic that we'll be able to move this forward and get this passed.
Great. Well, thank you for the initiative, because I think, again, in terms of the threats to the region, one of the best ways to answer that is to give Israel everything it needs to survive and meet those threats. And exactly. I think this is one way to do it. The other way is obviously the regular foreign aid bill, because what you mentioned the MOU and securing the authorization for the MOU, that would be just authorizing the MOU and the money provided. Congress actually has to appropriate that money every year through a regular appropriations bill, and it's through the foreign aid appropriations bill. And Congressman Meadows, again, you're the leader of the Freedom Caucus, and no secret there, but deficit reduction is a big goal of the caucus, and something that the caucus has been very involved in. It's also no secret that foreign aid has always been a target of some of that deficit reduction. And yet you are a strong supporter of both aid to Israel and the foreign aid in general. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that. How is it that how is that important to both Israel and the United States?
Well, I think what it has to be is the wise, strategic use of the American taxpayer dollars. And so if we're going to be efficient about anything, let's be efficient and spend money in areas that actually produce a result. There is no greater example of foreign dollars going into a region other than the example of Israel and what we've done in a partnership. You know, you mentioned Iron Dome just a few minutes ago. Well, it's not about a missile defense system. It's about lives that are saved each and every day. I have an alert on my phone called Red Alert. And so this morning I got up and I knew that the missiles had gone off because I get a real-time alert from the attacks that go on. And what we have to do is make sure that our allies understand that we are willing to support them, but we also need to make sure that our enemies know that we're willing to support our allies as well. So I've been a strong advocate for that. And when you do that, the people back home, I say it a lot, Ted's district is very different than mine. And yet, from a pro-Israel standpoint, he can get a standing ovation in South Florida. I can get one in the mountains of western North Carolina, but just by saying that we're going to stand with the nation of Israel and our Jewish brothers and sisters, and that's what it's all about. And when you take the real message for the right reason, it always works. And so I've been strong actually advocating with this administration to make sure that we don't back down, and I can tell you that this president, this administration is going to work in a bipartisan way to make sure that Israel is supported.
Thank you. Thank you for that voice. Very important. So just an overall question about activism. Again, there are several thousand people in this room, 18,000 at the conference generally, and tomorrow we will be going up to Capitol Hill to exercise our rights and our obligations as American citizens to lobby on behalf of an issue that we care very deeply about. From your perspective as members of Congress, how important is it that we're there? Because obviously people come at great expense, and this is an issue where none of us make any money from, just the opposite. I think it's costing most people money because we care. But does it really matter on Capitol Hill in terms of your votes, other votes?
It does. I can tell you a personal story.
Okay.
All right, so Ted introduces this bill. Just happens to be before 19,000 of his closest friends are coming to Washington, D.C. So I look and see, well, what is everybody advocating for? Well, I see this bill that Ted has, and I get onto my staff. I said, I've got these people that are coming to my office tomorrow. They're going to ask me why I'm not on this bill. Why are we not on it? I said, well, Congressman, he just introduced it on Thursday. So, I mean, and so when we look at that, it makes a real difference. But here's where it really makes a difference. I can remember, and there are people here in the audience, when they came into a freshman member of Congress's office. They have become family. We've gone to a bar mitzvah, for a new family member of mine that we would have never have met had it not been for your activism going to make new friends on Capitol Hill. It's personal, and that's why when it goes to funding and doing the right thing, you're just protecting your family, and that's what your difference makes. It really is.
Ester, I want to thank you for the important point that you just made. Don't let anyone mischaracterize who you are or why you're here. The reason that every one of you has come to Washington for Policy Conference is because you are American citizens exercising your constitutional right to come to DC to talk to your elected officials about something that you care deeply about, and that's the U.S.-Israel relationship. That message which you will deliver to your members of Congress will be heard by them, and it will be seen by those who have attempted to divide those of us who are here, and those attempts will fail, because ultimately what this is about is strengthening the United States, strengthening and advancing our own values, and standing with the one democracy, the one island of stability in a region of instability, and exactly the kind of ally that we ought to have and strive to protect, and that's Israel. That's why you're here, and I'm really grateful for it.
So, Ester,
sure.
I just want to say, tomorrow, be bold. Do not be shy. They will not divide you or us on this important issue, so be bold. God bless you.
Great message. And I would just add to that, when you come to Policy Conference next year, bring your friend, bring your neighbor, bring someone else, so that we're not just 18,000 people, we're 36,000 people, and that's going to be the goal for everybody in the room.
Esther, can I just do one thing?
Yeah, go.
I'm sorry, because I know I've probably not been in the hall when this has been done by others, but I want to take the opportunity to acknowledge and particularly thank you. Talk about people who have gone out of their way to come here. For all of the students who have come from campuses all across America, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for what you're going to do on campus. Thank you for the leaders that you are right now.
Great message, 4,000 students. And thank you to both of you. You have been amazing leaders, amazing friends, and thank you for coming here and for all you do. And a big round of applause for these incredible friends.
Thank you, Esther.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks, Esther.
Thank you. It was great. Awesome.